Peter Mandelson was in bed with an Israeli asset. No one in the media asked him that question. How many other politicians are either Israeli assets themselves or have similar types of relationships that Peter Mandelson had and are on a daily basis not being asked about it by people who are paid to hold these politicians to account? This is a scandal of massive proportions. The politicians are trying to blame the media.
He'd been prominent in the media as a broadcaster, writing in newspapers. He was continued to be given that platform and respectability.
The media are trying to blame the politicians.
There were plenty of people around Keir Starmer who were saying, we know about Mandelson's relationship to Epstein.
Bad idea, Keir.
It's a bad idea, Keir.
The fact is, both sides of that equation are guilty.
Now, our next guest, Peter Mandelson, was alongside Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, one of the architects of New Labour. Good to have you on the programme this morning, Mr. Mandelson.
A few moments later.
Condemning Peter Mandelson right now is easy. And I think the thing that I am struggling with slightly is that now that all these leaked documents have come out, everyone says, oh, he's a really bad guy. We knew this guy was a paedophile.
Sophie Ridge is raising her voice now, but you had the chance in front of him and you didn't take it. The nature of the establishment in this country is that there is an incestuous relationship between the media and political class. So much so today that someone like Trevor Phillips is falling over himself to try and distance himself from Mandelson and throw him under the bus.
He has been, at best, naive and foolish, at worst, greedy and duplicitous.
But literally Peter Mandelson was the best man at Trevor Phillips' wedding. And of course had him on his flagship show to pontificate about the latest issues of the day that affect people like me and you.
Good morning, Lord Mandelson.
Good morning.
The establishment rules through the political class and the media class with finance behind it. In fact, this picture is worth 1,000 words. Emily Maitlis now wants to express her disbelief at how we didn't know for all this time.
Why has it taken us so long to learn what this person is?
At the same time as you supposedly knew that he was scandalous.
None of it is really surprising. I mean, you know, you're talking about a man who was at the heart of government twice before and both times got sacked for very similar, very adjacent...
Money and influence.
Money and influence.
But this was somebody who was seen in public fawning over Peter Mandelson. Somebody who was advocating for the talent of Peter Mandelson and reprimanding Corbyn for not involving him in his leadership.
There's a lot of talent, isn't there? Advisors like Peter Mandelson, would they be welcome back? Should Jeremy Corbyn say, you know what, you're welcome into the fold, you get jobs?
Emily Maitlis works with John Sopel.
Keir Starmer had a choice in appointing Peter Mandelson as our ambassador to Washington. And there were many people in government and there were many people in the security services who said, whoa, are you sure about this?
John Sopel wrote an article calling Peter Mandelson a class act. Another one at the newsagents, Lewis Goodall, just a year ago, gave a very softball interview to Mandelson.
Do you think you would make a good ambassador to the United
I
States?
think I'd make a really good, earnest, hard-working, zealous, kindly, warm Chancellor of this university.
Would you be a kindly, warm, zealous ambassador to the United States, just theoretically?
Theoretically, I'm focused on one thing, and that's Oxford.
Lord Mandelson, thank you very much.
The question has to be asked, when millions of people across the country knew that Mandelson was a close friend of Jeffrey Epstein, why did not one of these journalists ask him about it?
I interviewed Mandelson in November 2024, and I was aware of the FT reporting at the time. And I thought long and hard about whether to ask about the Epstein stuff. And now I regret not doing so, because clearly it was the right question to ask, and it was a kind of journalistic oversight on my part. And it doesn't show the political media class in a good light whatsoever, by the way, but it is true to say that that was not the emphasis and focus at the time.
So here you have Lewis Goodall admitting that he did not hold Peter Mandelson to account for what he was doing with Jeffrey Epstein. What did Lewis Goodall and the rest of the mainstream media do with Peter Mandelson? They asked him about anti-Semitism in Corbyn's Labour Party.
The leader and the National Executive Committee would have no alternative but to take action.
This debate, as so often surrounding anti-Semitism and Labour, is one about language. But when McCluskey sat down with me, he used language that could be considered an anti-Semitic trope.
Does it give you any pause at all that I conducted an interview with Peter Mandelson yesterday, where he was nothing but full of praise for Keir Starmer?
No, whatever I stopped listening to what Peter Mandelson said many, many years ago. I would suggest that Peter just goes into a room and counts his gold, not worry about what's happening in the Labour Party. Leave that to those of us that are interested in ordinary working people.
Peter Mandelson had a Jewish grandfather. Mr. McCluskey maintains that the language he used is not anti-Semitic.
The idea that McCluskey was somehow motivated by an irrational hatred of Peter Mandelson or some of his ancestors. The fact is clear. Peter Mandelson was corrupt. He gained wealth through corruption. Len McCluskey was alluding to that. Now, Robert Peston is attempting to disassociate himself and distance himself.
For years, everybody knows that Epstein is a bad un. And as you say, everybody knows that Mandelson is somebody who has been sacked for repeatedly breaching the rules. How is it that both of these people end up being rehabilitated? What is wrong with our system?
But there were constant appearances by Peter Mandelson on his show to wax lyrical about the crisis in Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party.
Your colleague Andy MacDonald, who used that phrase, which many people think is anti-Semitic, from the river to the sea. Do you think he was too slow to remove the whip?
Not in the least, no.
In fact, in an ironic Freudian slip, Peter Mandelson says that due to this situation and crisis in the Labour Party, one that did not exist, he felt morally compromised.
When I look at the sort of anti-Semitic abuse, I feel ashamed. I feel actually quite morally compromised.
Yet he did not feel morally compromised by the fact he was sharing national secrets from the inner sanctum of government with an Israeli asset and convicted paedophile. Let's be clear, the campaign to bring down Corbyn was not just a British one, not just the British establishment working on it, but the Israelis too. Part of that Israeli project against Corbyn was the confection of a false crisis. The idea that those that support Palestine and Corbyn were somehow motivated by an irrational hatred of other people. The entire media that is now attempting to distance itself from Israeli asset Peter Mandelson went ahead with the whole project. Just picture this. Boris Johnson, at a time where Andrew, the son of the Queen, is widely believed to have been compromised by Jeffrey Epstein, says,
"The institution of the monarchy is beyond reproach."
Jeremy Corbyn talked about the victims of Jeffrey Epstein and why they deserved support.
I think we should discuss the victims that are there because of what Epstein was doing. And I think there are very, very serious questions that must be answered, and nobody should be above the law.
What do you think this media class focused on? The pronunciation of the word Epstein, as said by Jeremy Corbyn. It was somehow proof of his irrational hatred of other people. These people are liars. The same media which would only interview Peter Mandelson to talk about the Israeli fake anti-Semitism project against Corbyn is now trying to convince you that Jeffrey Epstein was a Russian agent. Because of course, a Russian agent would work on expanding Israel's surveillance reach and insinuating Israeli tech firms into the Côte d'Ivoire, taking over the security of that state. Of course, a Russian agent would have 60 meetings with Ehud Barak while he was, in some cases, the defense minister, while he was the head of military intelligence, while he was prime minister. He did have contact with the Russians. Do you know why that was? It was to create a backdoor for the Israelis to work with the Russians over what was happening in Syria. Let's be clear. The Epstein files reveal Epstein funded both the Friends of the IDF and the largest settlement building body in Palestine, the JNF. In addition to that, while he was on trial and about to be given his sweetheart deal, which saw him face basically no time in jail, Jeffrey Epstein was taken on a tour of Israeli military bases around occupied Palestine by a board member of the Friends of the IDF. Ari Ben Menashe, a former Israeli intelligence officer, actually met Jeffrey Epstein during his work for Israeli intelligence several times. In fact, 4 anonymous sources came forth and pointed out that Epstein was an Israeli asset. None of this tells me that he was a Russian agent. But yet the very same media that protected Mandelson and killed Corbynism for Israel is now trying to tell you to ignore the evidence that Epstein worked for Israel and create an idea that he worked for the Russians.
Let me begin tonight with something that I think is even more important, even more extraordinary. Growing suspicions of a Russian connection. He filmed and taped powerful Western leaders in deeply compromising situations. Doesn't it make you wonder at least about the possibility of a KGB operation big enough to ensnare former presidents and prime ministers and the leaders of some of the world's most powerful companies?
Today, Andrew Marr is fulfilling his function as a propaganda service for those that hope to manage this PR crisis. He is trying to convince you that Jeffrey Epstein was somehow a Russian agent, in the very same way that Andrew Marr tried to convince viewers on the BBC that the war in Iraq, launched by Blair and with support from Mandelson, was leading to a better tomorrow.
I don't think anybody after this is going to be able to say of Tony Blair that he's somebody who is driven by the drift of public opinion. He took all of those on. He said that they would be able to take Baghdad without a bloodbath and that in the end the Iraqis would be celebrating. And on both of those points he has been proved conclusively right. Tonight he stands as a larger man and a stronger Prime Minister as a result.
Andrew, many thanks.
The truth is, the media class is well trained and disciplined, and it behaves in this way as part of the infrastructure of our society. This is the way the establishment functions. Let's be clear, Peter Mandelson was seen as suitable to be UK ambassador to the US because both he and Trump are key associates of Jeffrey Epstein. They would never see that as antithetical from representing the UK government to a government headed by somebody so deeply involved with Jeffrey Epstein. Peter Mandelson even sent out a secret notice to the media across the country not to talk about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. On the same day, the Times newspaper publishes this rubbish, depicting Peter Mandelson relaxed at home with his dog. On the weekend, where he is exposed for the entire world to be cavorting with paedophile and Israeli asset Jeffrey Epstein with his feet up, shoes on, eating a sandwich, dog running around. This is the rehabilitation of a scumbag. The Times uses the quote, "I've had a lot of bad luck. No doubt some of it is my own making." On the other page, what do you have here? Yes, this picture is new. This one isn't. It's been known that Peter Mandelson was a birthday pal, a clothes shopping pal with Israeli asset and convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. You all knew. This is not journalism. This is rubbish. The very same Times newspaper, which hired Peter Mandelson to run a podcast called How to Win an Election. Today, Mandelson's co-hosts are trying to distance themselves also.
It's interesting that you can sort of know somebody in the way that you do when you work a little bit together. and you don't know them at all, actually. I'm, pretty appalled by it. I'm sort of quite a prissy person anyway, and I guess that can shade into naivety, so maybe other people aren't as shocked by this as I am, and they look at him and say, well, of course, I always knew that he'd behave like that. I'm amazed anybody did.
Like Danny, I was surprised, and maybe that is because I retain a certain kind of naivety.
Many people in the media now are trying to distance themselves from Peter Mandelson, but the simple fact is they have all known for many years. They just haven't wanted to take any form of accountability for it, because baked into our system is an unaccountability for the powerful. Think of the audacity of David Lammy to say that he warned Keir Starmer about Peter Mandelson taking the job. He warned him so much that he told everyone how great Peter Mandelson would be for that job.
Peter Mandelson is a man of considerable expertise. He's the right man for this moment to be our ambassador.
Only 5 months ago, Wes Streeting was defending Peter Mandelson on the news with everything that he had.
Our ambassador has made it very clear that he deeply regrets ever having been introduced to Epstein.
So it doesn't lead to a change in ambassador or any consideration of that?
No, I don't think we should regard everyone as guilty by association.
Not only Keir Starmer, but much of the media and political ecosystem of this country is in some way ensnared within the program and structures backing up Jeffrey Epstein. The truth is that today, people like Piers Morgan will come out and call Peter Mandelson a snivelling little traitor. But the simple fact is that Double Down News exposed Peter Mandelson years ago. Why was he protected for so long? And how could he have been appointed ambassador to the United States when everyone knew about his close personal friendship with Jeffrey Epstein? Double Down News published information about Peter Mandelson and his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein years ago, while these figures in the media and in the political class were fawning over him. That is the difference, and that is why you should support Double Down News on Patreon now.